Hi, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. Thanks for, I think the incentive structure to get a seat led to us being able to start on time, which is great. So as the What Works Hub for Global Education, we are both a research and a policy program, and we care a lot about impact. And we've structured our conference this year to kind of highlight that. So we have a mix of research presentations, which we saw a lot of this morning, but also policy discussions to try to get into some of this messy detail of how we actually get things done, how we get them done in government and in government systems. And so this is our first high-level policy panel of the conference. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce our speakers here and really dig into the details. So I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Michelle Koffenberger. I'm the head of evidence translation for the What Works Hub for Global Education. And I will go down and introduce everyone, and then we will kick it off for some discussion. So first we have Nampumelelo Mohokwane, who is an education researcher working at the National Department of Basic Education in South Africa. Her work includes systems monitoring and conducting research and evaluation of education interventions. She's part of the research team for the government-led early grade reading study. Welcome, Mpumi. And then we have a different order, but we have next Hajia. Sorry, my notes are the other way, but we have Hajia Nana Fatima Hai. Welcome, Hajia, who plays the pivotal role of coordinator for the Ghana Education Outcomes Project at the Ministry of Education. Her leadership is instrumental in overseeing interventions that reintegrate out-of-school children and enhance learning outcomes in mainstream primary schools. Haji's work is a testament to her commitment to improving educational opportunities and living standards for children in Ghana. Welcome, Hajia. Next, we have Aneth Komba, who is the Director General of the Tanzania Institute of Education, TAI, where she successfully coordinated the process of the 6th major curriculum reform in Tanzania. Dr. Komba is also a senior lecturer for courses on education policies and qualitative research and methodology, and she has participated in a number of national and international research projects on implementing quality education, pedagogy, and leadership, and more. Welcome, Aneth. And then finally, we have Moitshepi Matchang, who is the co-founder and managing director of Youth Impact, a youth-led movement reaching more than 200,000 young people in 10 countries. Youth Impact's mission is to scale high-impact health and education programs. She's a social innovator focused on bringing evidence-based education programs to be institutionalized in government systems, and she serves as the chairperson with the Botswana National Youth Council. So welcome to all of our esteemed panelists. We're very pleased to have you with us today for this discussion. Great. So this session is focused around policy discussions in What Works Hub countries. So these are all these folks are also tied to studies or efforts that the What Works Hub has going on in these countries. So with that, we will go ahead and kick things off. I'm going to pose a question to everyone, and we'll kind of go down and discuss it, and then I have a few follow-ups for kind of people individually. So to start with, you all sit in various government roles. Can you tell us a little bit about your institutions and policy structures, and particularly how you've created enabling environments for evidence generation and use, and particularly, of course, focused on kind of educational quality? So Mpumi, would you mind kicking us off there?
Sure. I am part of the Research Monitoring and Evaluation Unit in the National Department of Basic Education, so the ministry. The ministry is responsible for overseeing 9 provincial education departments with a mandate for policy, monitoring, and oversight. Although over time, our role has gone beyond just policy and oversight into some implementation. Our unit-specific mandate is sector monitoring. So monitoring trends over time, how many 5-year-olds are in school now compared to 10 years ago, compared to 15 years ago, et cetera. We produce that kind of system monitoring data annually. A second aspect is evaluating government programs or policies. One of the recent requests we've received is to help think about small schools. We have small and non-viable schools, and to try and put together information about what those look like, how well they're functioning, are they good, are they bad? So that's an existing policy that we are writing up and evaluating. And then the third category is around research and innovation. So this is where we have had randomized control trials to try and figure out how to teach reading effectively in early grades, as well as more recently developed reading benchmarks for African languages. So it's a lot of the innovation sort of whiteboard aspect of our work. Then the question on how we have generated or created a space for creating evidence is, while we have a research agenda that is public, within our section, we have declared that we can't do the whole research agenda ourselves. That's a sector good. And we have had to make 2 or 3 choices about areas of prioritization so that we can do work well. We've also made some medium to long-term commitments on the topics that we're picking. So we're 10 years into figuring out reading and maybe about 5 years into numeracy, so some prioritization. And then we have had to become social entrepreneurs. We fundraise a lot because in the original mandate of the department, there was no direct money allocated to research. So the conception at Democracy Think was that we would sit at our desks and analyze administrative data that exists. So we do that, but anything that's beyond that has meant we need to ourselves go and raise money outside the department. So that's not in the mandate, but that's how we've had to engage to make things happen. And then maybe a last one is we've had to work quite hard to build trust internally. To be seen as not just critics and mirrors, but to be seen as partners. So while we are the people who generate the evidence that shows that children can't read, we're also the same people that will go on TV and defend what the department is doing. So we need to do both. And it's meant there isn't an us and them. We're seen as like, we need to identify the problem, but we'll also help you figure out how to resolve it.
Great, and a tricky thing to do and achieve, absolutely. Hajia, do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And in Ghana, the Minister for Education, Honorable Yao Osei Educhim, he is the one who leads the policy decision at Ministry of Education. So everything starts with him. But then we have a directorate at the Ministry of Education called PBME, which is Policy Planning, Budgeting, Monitoring, and Evaluation. That's where all policy decisions sit in the technical team. They advise him on the policies that work and that doesn't work. Now, I am in GEOP, which is Ghana Education Outcomes Project, sitting under Gallup. So I'll focus my answer towards that, if you don't mind. PBME, through their research in looking in the census that was conducted a few years ago, realized that Ghana had a high prevalence of out-of-school children in the northern part of Ghana. And with that gave birth to GEOP, where we are providing the interventions over there. Now, fast forward to present day. Now, in the northern part of Ghana, they are doing exceptionally well in testing. Our national testing, they excel, but they still have a high prevalence of out-of-school children. See, it's a mix. So if you look at the data on student testing, you think that, okay, we don't need to go back to the north. But you do a deep dive, you see that they still have a high prevalence of out-of-school children. So that's why GEOP is still there. And policy-wise, the ministry looks at what is working, what is not working, and then they collaborate with NACA, which conducts the standardized testing, to ensure that the data that comes out of the standardized testing is accurate and is given a true reflection of where the government needs to focus and provide additional intervention to ensure that the children do well. Now with GEOP, FCDO, thank you very much, FCDO, they came up with the funding to support this intervention where we're reintegrating out-of-school children back into school and ensure that they stay in school. Now, they had to collaborate with the World Bank and the EOF team. EOF team, thank you so much. They are our technical expertise, So we work closely with them, with the PBME team, to come up with the policies, and we look at the evidence, what is working, what is not working, to ensure that this intervention works very well. In addition to that, we have KPMG. They are our independent verification agency that Claire mentioned earlier this morning. They independently evaluate the results from the service providers, which would inform payments made to them in this outcome-based funding project. The last census showed that Ghana had 1.5 million out-of-school children, which is a lot. Yeah, but GEOP is looking at reintegrating 70,000 children back into school. So upon completion of this project, and when we look at the service providers intervention that worked the most with the help of What Works Hub, thank you, Jen and Claire. With their help, we would determine which intervention worked the most, that's the evidence bit, then we can scale it up to try and get most of this 1.5 million children back into school. You're welcome.
For that. Yeah. Next, do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
I'm working with the Tanzania Institute of Education. This is an institute which is under the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. And the institute is responsible for implementing 4 major functions which are regarded to be fundamental to the educational framework of Tanzania. We are responsible for designing, developing and review curricula for pre-primary, primary, secondary and teacher education. But with teacher education, we are only dealing with diploma and certificate levels. With regard to this responsibility, we are also supposed to conduct monitoring and evaluation to see the effectiveness of the implementation of our curriculum. But we are also supposed to prepare curriculum support materials, and this include like textbooks, syllabi, and teacher guides. But we are also assisting the Commissioner for Education in a process of approving supplementary textbooks, which are normally written by private publishers. We are also responsible to provide in-service teacher training for teachers, just to make sure that they effectively and efficiently implement our curriculum. And last, we are legally responsible to conduct research and to also provide consultant services to the government and other stakeholders regarding the various issues in education, including the general quality of education. So my discussion on policy structure and how I have created an enabling environment for evidence generation and use will focus on 3 key components. The first component is regarding the formal legal foundation and the laws, which provide the authority to Tanzania Institute of Education to propose and also to enact changes and improvement in areas which are related to our 4 functions. And I can say here that the institute was established by a parliamentary act number 13 of 1975. And this act grants Tanzania Institute of Education the authority and responsibility to carry out the previous mentioned 4 functions, including conducting research and using findings to improve practices of both basic and teacher education levels. So we have utilized this opportunity to undertake numerous research projects. And some of the researches have been financed by internally generated funds. So we have in our budget line funds which are specifically for conducting research, but also some of the research has been funded by development partners and others by non-government organizations. And so the institute has been able to generate and apply evidence-based practices in enhancing education provision. I can give here 2 examples. For example, in 2017, we developed the so-called e-library, which is loaded with all of our teaching and learning materials. It has a lot of textbooks, it has videos, and so on. And the development of this e-library was based on the continuous user experience research, just to ensure that it is accessible and it is inclusive for all users, including those in rural areas and those with disabilities. Similarly, James mentioned here in the morning regarding the learning management system. So we have also developed the learning management system, and this system has been continuously adaptively improved on the basis of the findings from user experience research for the purpose of improving its usability, accessibility, and reliability. In this way, we have been able to make it more user-friendly and accessible to teachers with disability. And so we expect that the What Work Hub Tanzania team will also support future improvement. And maybe I wish to mention here that in Tanzania, all teachers were provided with tablets. James mentioned this in the morning. And all education platforms which are prepared by the Institute have been 0 rated. The Institute signed a memorandum of understanding with one of the mobile provider, and so teachers don't need even internet to access education platform. But funny enough, teachers are still not using this platform. So that's why What Work Hub is assisting us to make sure that teachers are accessing the learning management system. The second policy structure is the institutional arrangement and the organization structure. Tanzania Institute of Education is a higher learning institute, which is not a university. And so we have a number of departments which are academic departments. And one of the departments is known as Research Consultants and Publication Department. One of the roles of this department is to carry out research in the field of education with a view of establishing research-based facts and solutions for improving the quality of education for early grade, primary, secondary, and teacher education. So having this department at Tanzania Institute of Education is an opportunity for us to conduct various research, to collect evidence, to formulate and enforce innovations and initiatives to strengthen our education system and the quality of education in general. And the last policy structure is monitoring and evaluation. I mentioned this while mentioning the function of the Tanzania Institute of Education. So we have a system in place to track the effectiveness of the implementation of all of our key responsibilities and make necessary adjustments based on the findings and feedback. For example, right now, James mentioned, and even Doreen yesterday mentioned this, that Tanzania is currently implementing the revised curriculum. We started this in the year 2023. And monitoring and evaluation is part and parcel of the rollout of the curriculum. And so we are using evidence and findings from monitoring and evaluation to prepare appropriate intervention to make sure that the curriculum is implemented as expected. And I can give an example. For example, one of the major changes in our revised curriculum is introduction of the teaching and learning of English from standard 1. And we have also changed even methodology of teaching language subjects. And we are saying that we need to use communicative language teaching approach. We want to insist our students to acquire 4 major language skills, which are reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So while implementing our curriculum and while conducting monitoring and evaluation, we revealed a gap in implementation of the English curriculum for standard 1. And we, particularly in phonics, we noted that teachers were struggling to teach sounds and children were also struggling to read words fluently. So we consulted a company which is known as Jolly Learning Limited. We conducted baseline together, we collected data, and then we provided training to teachers regarding the use of Jolly Phonics in teaching language. And then we conducted a pilot study for 6 months. And at the end, we collected data and we noted that Jolly Phonics enabled teachers to enhance the students' reading and writing skills. So right now we are working to scale up across the country the use of Jolly Phonics in teaching and learning of English. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Mutepi from Youth Impact. I wear very different hats. And also part of my role really is to sit with government and to understand a lot of their work as well as their priorities in terms of programming, but also in terms of the questions that they think about and they care about. And I think as our role as Youth Impact, we sit in a position where we can be able to generate evidence to support programming, which relates to education outcomes in schools. So I think we play quite a unique role in that sense of connecting evidence with action. And I think that's always so important in understanding ways in which, we should prioritize some of the learnings, but also to understand better what, does government want and what does government need in terms of the questions that they need to be understood. So a few things here just to set the stage to the question you asked, Michelle. The first one, as Nompu Melelo shared in the beginning, is around prioritization. And I think, creating an enabling environment for data use is truly understanding what are the priorities and questions that are a central concern to decision makers in their various levels, right? That align to their policy priorities. I think often at times, we always want to find out more, right? And I think that's the beauty about research, that it can really contribute to, the broader body of knowledge, but truly understanding, what matters to policymakers and decision makers, and targeting and answering that question is one way, to be helpful, to various governments, but also thinking a little bit more about to understand the purpose, right, of the evidence and who it is ultimately for. I think most of us in this room here are involved in implementation at some capacity. And we need to think that the data ultimately has to reach and be beneficial to the learner or even the teaching practices. So really, truly understanding the purpose of why we're collecting the evidence and who it's ultimately for is super important. And then the third one is understanding the type of data that we will provide to government stakeholders. This is so important because, we can produce all the nice graphs and show all the linear, trends, but really understanding what type and in what frequency do government stakeholders collect the data is so important. So an example I can give is when we were presenting, the data from the Teaching at the Right Level work, we brought out these really beautiful graphs, and all, the government stakeholders wanted in that particular region was a simple table to show how many students progressed from addition after 30 days, how many, tracked into subtraction, multiplication, division. So simplicity, right, in understanding the type of data and how to present it is so useful. Another example that I can share with you, at school level, the data that we collect should be closely linked to the decisions that the implementers are going to make. So for example, when you enter a Teaching at the Right Level school, in Botswana, for example, you find a leveling chart. This is Manila, and it's color-coded to track, the students that move from addition, and after end line, what was the progression from to the other operations. This is just an example to say that it is not too fancy, it is easily understandable, and they can be able to use. So some of the strategies that I can share about what type of data is needed and how best to do so is that we should not only think a lot about numbers, right? I know that there's a lot of quant people around here, but also just to share that, having results that are visible. It can either even be in the form of site visits or even testimonials, right? That's some type of qualitative data that government folks really appreciate to actually know that it's working. And then another point that I wanted to share is around timely data. Is so important, particularly as we are implementing, to be able to have review meetings where we look at dashboards, but also to reflect, as well as to think a lot more about what does this data say, and how can we be able to use it for action. So thinking a lot more about how can the frequency of data for decision making, but also ensuring that the data is timely, such that the implementers, right, the ones that are directly working with schools, the ones that are directly, facilitating learning, are able to really use this data for action, right? We don't want just to collect data and give it to government for it to just sit, right? We need to think about tighter, feedback loops to ensure that they can be able to, take it to the next step. We'll just also share that, lastly, that we see our role as an organization on strengthening government capacity and skills for data collection, analysis, as a core part of our work. I'm sure folks around this room can appreciate how many meetings we've been in, and various government folks have said, we need M&E, right? That's their version of saying we need, data in understanding our programs and understanding them better. But at some points, they can only go to the extent. So you need other social actors such as Youth Impact and many other local NGOs who have the expertise to work with them, right? To work with them to understanding the data on how we're collecting it, but also how we are analyzing it, and really, taking it to the next step. So I think seeing our role and playing an important role in that is also quite important. So all is to share that the enabling environment is to actually be enabling to governments, right? In the sense of, we can present all the data, we can share, the questions that are important, but there's a role that we need to really play in supporting them to be able to build their capacity and skills. But that also comes from truly understanding what their priorities are.
Great, thanks for that, and thanks to all of you. So I think we've laid a really solid foundation and a few themes that I've picked up on. So one is like quite a variety of, say, institutional setups that we've already heard from, but some commonalities. So some of the commonalities I picked up on were kind of this role of embedded research and conducting new research, but maybe it's not fully embedded in the mandate, so it requires some outside effort, but getting some new research. The evidence uptake piece of it, facilitating the use of the evidence that's there that maybe needs a little bit of help, monitoring and evaluation for implementation. Implementation itself, right? I think the tablet example is such an interesting example because even talking about the 0 rating, there was actually a lot of thought put into implementing that, right? Like, let's make sure it's 0 rated so there's no cost to the teachers to be able to use these. And still it wasn't used. And so now we have to rethink it. So the kind of the iterative process that it takes to get those pieces right. And then aligning with government priorities, which I think we all know is a huge piece of this, but came out in multiple of what people were saying. I like, Mpumi, how you put it, so that it's not us versus them, or even not us and them. It's us together as a partnership. We're doing this together, which I think is a big part of this as well. Great. So given each of these setups that each of you are representing, we did have some specific questions that we want to dig into a little bit more depth. So I'm going to pose another question, but to each of them, and then we're going to open up to the room for questions. So kind of be noting down your questions that you have for everyone. But I'll go ahead and go down again. So Mpumi, for you, can you share an example of an implementation challenge that you've experienced and how you and your colleagues were able to either kind of overcome it or work through it and navigate the difficulties? And I say this because I think there's always a priority at places like this to talk about the successes, but actually learning from the challenges and how they've been overcome, I think is really important for the sector. For Hajia, could you pick up on the outcomes funding piece of it and maybe tell us a little bit about what you think outcomes funding can give us that more traditional funding approaches maybe are less well tailored for? Annette would love to dig in a little bit more on TIE as an ed lab and how you think the ed lab will enable evidence uptake and use, And also this kind of, what kind of evidence do you think is going to be most useful? Providing access to global evidence, providing access and uptake of kind of Tanzania specific evidence, or actually the analysis of existing government administrative data, lots of different directions that can take. And then for youth impact, could you talk a little bit about, Mochepi, on the nationwide scale up of TARL, and what one or two of the key factors were that you think drove the interest and support for TARL among the policymakers that you had to work with to get that going? And I think we'll go ahead and go in the same order there. So I'll go ahead and give it to you.
Sure. So we, it'll be two, but it'll be quick. The first is implementing at a district level. So working with a set of schools in an education district. This is after we've designed our RCT and we're sort of in the scaling up phase of the RCT. And the province and district were responsible for paying for catering and the venue for teacher training. And when the time came for them to do that, they couldn't because procurement timelines. And yeah, something like the financial year is ending, and therefore for the month before that, you can't procure. And money needs to be transferred across different district to school level and then procured. And therefore teacher training is not going to happen as we had planned it. It'll be delayed by a month. And the choice we had is to intervene, get external funding, deliver on our plans on the dates that we had intended, or to recognize that this is a system feature. We can fix it this time and have a great fidelity score, but in reality, the financial year end and the school term overlap every single time. So maybe the wiser thing is letting this happen and working through that problem with the district and province to resolve it and have a fix for the next year and the next year. And so we chose to not intervene and instead to change our own implementation plans to align with that. So it didn't happen neatly where you have just-in-time training and then the term starts. We needed to do something else to cope with that. And maybe the second separate example is working through challenges with an implementation NGO. So while we have all these technical reports and publications from our RCTs about the dosage, package, etc., for intervening, for reading in African languages, when we were working with the second and third NGO, their own understanding of what they were meant to be doing changed. And having those technical reports wasn't enough. We realized quite soon that their design and implementation was quite weak. And we had some very difficult conversations with them. We had to have contracting conversations with them. They were externally funded. I had to ask to see budget line items, who's getting paid what, why is the coaching dose lower than we think it should be, where are you procuring materials, why do they cost double what we think they should cost? So that kind of, a lot of intervention there, very in-depth. They didn't expect that. But aside from the intervening, we commissioned an implementation evaluation because we thought we want to document the lessons here. They're not the only NGO we're ever going to work with. How do we handle this the next time we're working with 2 or 3 or 4 NGOs? And it led to us coming up with quite detailed guides on what we mean when we say ratio, coaching, teacher training, LTSM, etc. So, yeah.
That's great. I love that. It's kind of I hear embrace the messiness lesson. And also the thing that stood out to me with both of those examples is your kind of systemic and long-term vision of we're not just here actually to solve the immediate problem. We actually want to be doing something that's going to solve it in at least the medium term, maybe the long term, and kind of embracing that as well and the messiness that might come with it. Yeah. Thanks for that. Okay, Ajia, go ahead.
GEOP is the largest education outcomes fund project in the world. So all eyes are on Ghana in this project to see how scalable it's going to be and how successful. And I think outcome-based funding approach puts the service providers on their toes because they know that if they don't achieve the results, they would not get paid. If you go to the northern part of Ghana, you see so many signs of NGOs all over the place. So you should expect the place to be very developed and should not even have one child out of school. Shouldn't be poverty. But poverty is all over the place. So what are the NGOs doing? Are they really working to provide results? Because there's no accountability. Upon completion of the project, they write this much report on it and then submit it. Who has time to read every page? And then they go and apply for another funding, another grant, and they get it, and then they come back. And it's the same thing. So this project, I'm so excited about it. You see the service providers trying to challenge us at every point because they know that if they don't deliver, they would not get paid. And it's a win-win for Ghana. We reintegrate out of school children, we get them back into school, and the service provider gets paid. It's a win-win. And as a coordinator, I just don't sit in the office. I'm in the field constantly. I go on monitoring. And when we are doing baseline assessment, I'm there to observe. So should in case the service providers come back saying that they saw some deficiencies or whatever in the process, I'm there, I'm observing it so I can challenge them. And if I see inconsistencies, I point it out myself for it to be corrected, you know, so they can't challenge me. And this is the best way, value for money. I would recommend outcome-based funding approach to every government. You keep everybody until there's an incentive. There's no results, you won't get paid. Without that accountability, some may not even go to work. And you're not there to see them. You know, they'll just write reports and tell you, yeah, this is what happened. And also, if they know you are coming without surprise visits, the day you are coming, everybody will be there for you to come and see that we are working. And they'll tell you that, oh, we are doing our best. It's just the situation, or maybe it's the children who are not. No, they're not doing it. So with this, then the service providers know that if there's no learning gains, they won't get paid. So they are constantly in the schools. And they know that the social investor needs to get their money back. And the social investor too they have their hands on monitoring and observing to ensure that they get paid back. And this keeps everybody accountable. So in a nutshell, the outcome funding provides greater focus on outcomes and accountability, thereby helping us to find context-specific solutions to the problem. The data that will help drive innovation and adaptability in policymaking, thereby bringing continuous improvement. And this is where What Works Hub comes in. You know, we are so grateful for this partnership, for you coming on board. You know, you are looking at the various innovative ways, interventions that the service providers are bringing. And then we see, based on the innovativeness and the results that we get from NST, the testing, then we help scale it up. We have a more comprehensive access to the pool of funds through greater coordination between social investors and service providers if they see the project successful. Directly tying funding to specific measurable outcomes and ensuring alignment with desired impact. And this payment upon achievement ensures that the delivery of efficient, innovative, and practical solutions. Sharing of risk promotes collaboration and innovative solutions. Something that, because it's an outcome-based project, my unit overseeing it should be hands-off and just leave them to do their work, and then we'll see if they succeed. And I say no, because if they fail, the children fail, we fail the children. So I would not let them fail for the sake of the children, for the sake of the outcome that the country wants. we want to reintegrate the children back into school. So what is not working, I make sure we find a solution. And we are always course correcting. And the EOF team, although they are sitting here in UK, but they are hands-on. We are constantly on Zoom meetings. They can even tell you the conversation that I had with somebody in Ghana, because after that conversation, I call them and give them updates. So there's a loop, and we're always in touch, and we know what is happening at every point in time. This outcome-based, it provides proven, reliable pathway to attract more funding and then to scale it. Once at the end of it, and we get the results from what works out, thanks again, it's possible to scale this project. I mean, they're helping us close the loop. Initially, I didn't see their role until now. It's very clear to me that they're helping us close the loop. We had a gap, and they're coming in to close the loop. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Hajia.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And I hear a strong endorsement for outcomes funding, which can be complex. So it's actually, not a given that it would be such a strong endorsement. So great. And that, EdLab.
Yeah. I think that the TIE lab will enable evidence uptake and use because of the three major reasons. One of the reasons is the embedded nature of the research within the TIE Ed Lab. This has been clearly mentioned in the morning by James, but very briefly, I'm saying that we have an advisory board which is composing of high-ranking officials who are responsible for administration and implementation of the revised curriculum and teacher continuous professional development policy. And this board is chaired by the deputy permanent secretary from the two ministries which are responsible for managing education. But it also consists of other members, representatives from relevant government departments and ministry. They've been mentioned in the morning. I'm not going to repeat them, but I just wish to mention that the board also consists of practicing teachers from least and best performing regions in primary school leaving examination and TCPD implementation. So this board is included in the research process from the inception phase, and members are regularly updated and they are invited to provide inputs throughout the research process. So their involvement ensures that the research aligns with the government priorities, foster ownership, and it enhances the likelihood of evidence being used. But the second reason is the fact that the lab has been strategically established within the government institution. I mentioned earlier that we are mandated by law to conduct research and also to utilize evidence to enhance practices. So TIE Ed Lab is led by the government and has been integrated within the existing government activities. To me, this strategic placement allows the institute to systematically implement its research activities, generate evidence, pilot and scale evidence which work across the country. In my previous responses, I gave examples of where we were able to scale up evidence to the wider community of Tanzania. And the last reason is the TI lab is currently focusing on two research areas, which they were mentioned in the morning: the rollout of the revised curriculum and the teacher training policy. So this area, to me, they are very critical to the national. I mentioned earlier, and I would really wish to reiterate here, that we reviewed our curriculum in 2023. So right now, I mean, all citizens in Tanzania, politicians, all leaders, they hope that the curriculum changes will lead to improvement of our education outcomes in Tanzania. And maybe I also wish to mention that the major purpose of reviewing our education was because we noted that our education system was producing graduates who were unable to compete in the labor market. So we thought that we need to review our education system and make sure that we have graduates who are graduating with the skills to enable them compete in the local, national, and global market, graduates who are self-reliant, and graduates who can either employ themselves or employ others. So really, the government is very keen to make sure that we are tracking the progress of the rollout of the curriculum. And I wish again to repeat that monitoring and evaluation of the curriculum rollout is one of the key mandates of the Tanzania Institute of Education. So to me, I see the TIE lab activities as yet another tool to enable TIE to collect evidence on whether the curriculum rollout is working as planned, and if not, what needs to be done to make sure that we are reaching the intended goal. And with regard to teacher training policy, we are saying that we want to make sure that our teachers are participating in teacher continuous professional development and are equipped with the skills to enable them implement the rollout of the curriculum. So again, the TIE Ed Lab will help us to provide with evidence whether teachers are really participating and what are the factors which hinder their participation, what factors resist them to participate in the learning management system, and what needs to be done to make sure that teachers are participating. So for sure, the evidence that will be generated by the TIE Ed Lab will be implemented to make sure that we are achieving the intended goal of curriculum rollout and the introduction of the TCPD policy. So generally, I can say that these two research agendas, which are conducted by the TIE Ed Lab, are both timely and relevant, and that the insights gained from this research are expected to play a key role in enhancing the quality of education delivery across the country. And we are in a position to implement them so that to make sure that the curriculum is being implemented as planned. The second part of the question is regarding the kind of evidence which will be most useful: global evidence, Tanzania-specific evidence, and the new data generation. So again, I think because we are implementing the revised curriculum, then the kind of evidence which are most useful globally and for Tanzania are evidence related to progress with regard to implementation of the revised curriculum. By the way, we have reformed our education system, our education policy, and education and curriculum. And so I think that Tanzania and even other countries will be interested to learn on the progress regarding implementation of the revised curriculum. And I think one of the most important questions here is, are the revised curricula implemented as planned? And also, within the revised curriculum, we have introduced a number of changes. Actually, it is a major curriculum reform. For example, we have revised our education system by reducing number of years for pre-primary. In the previous curriculum, it was 2 years for pre-primary, but right now it is only 1 year. And also, the duration for primary school has also been reduced. In the previous curriculum, it was 7 years. Right now, it is 7 years. But we have retained the duration for provision of ordinary and advanced level education, where it is 4 years and 2 years, respectively. But again, we have introduced 10 years of compulsory education. So we want our children to stay in schools for 10 years. And we have introduced 2 streams at the end of class 6. So some of the students will be joining general education stream, while others will be joining vocational education. So the question here is, are we achieving, are there any improvement in terms of student learning outcome? Are we achieving the intended objective of the curriculum review? But again, we have eliminated this class 7 national living examination, and instead we've introduced the class 6 continuous national assessment. So I think all these issues are really of interest. I mean, seeing whether we are really progressing toward positive, achieving the intended output, or are we not progressing as it was planned? Again, with regard...
Maybe just one more comment.
Yes, yes.
Have
Maybe I also want to add one thing regarding the use of ICT. In the revised curriculum, we are saying that we want our teachers to use ICT and the other technologies in the teaching and learning of all subjects. So I think that some of the interesting evidence would be, how are the teachers using ICT, especially considering on the diverse geographical condition in Tanzania. We have teachers who are located in rural areas, while others are located in urban areas. So evidence regarding which kind of technology is cost effective for teachers who are living in rural areas, I mean, could be very useful to countries which are surrounding Tanzania and even global evidence. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'll just say, yeah, implementation, rollout of the curriculum, lots of things near and dear to the hub. So
Yeah,
glad to hear all that.
absolutely. I don't want to take a lot of the audience time to ask questions but I would say that Youth Impact is now almost at scale in Botswana. We are 9 out of 10 regions, and we have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Education to reach all primary schools by the year 2025. So we are on this path. And it's quite ambitious, but we're really also excited to see a lot of our work, particularly in countries such as Namibia, South Africa, as well as the Philippines, expanding as it relates to teaching at the right level and working with various government partners. So really exciting to sort of use some of the lessons that we're learning in Botswana, but also across various countries. A few things that I can mention around some of our successes. Really identifying your champions, right? The folks that will be able to understand and also be excited about, the program, but also be decision makers, right? I think it's also, allows for the program to be successful, but also understanding your blockers, right? I think Rachel earlier on talked about, the broken pipes, right? And also thinking a lot more about, who fits in where and how do we all work together in a system. So I think that's also as equally as important. And often at times you find that sometimes to bring folks that might not necessarily be on site on board with programming, it's helpful to bring in the data, right? And also to show it, right? And I think that's the really importance of data, to be able to determine the extent of the challenge, but also to ensure that one can be able to know, that the intervention is actually working. That's one way to sort of influence the system and folks, right? So for example, when we started, we did, a situational analysis. We found that in Botswana, whilst it has high enrollment rates, good, classroom infrastructure, only 10% of students who were in grade 5 could do division. Right? So that really highlighted the problem that there was in terms of a learning crisis in a country which is like well-resourced and often at times, seen to have, a good education system. And then the second one that I wanted to share is we're really excited about the work that we're doing with the What Works Hub to be able to learn a lot using iterative processes such as A/B testing. A lot of our work as an organization is to think about how can we use A/B testing so that it can be able to inform a lot of our decisions around how do we optimize the program to make it as simple for government take up. Thinking a lot about how to, ensure targeted instruction, bringing in coaching tools to be used within the government system. So we're actually using A/B testing as one of an enabling tool for us to be able to learn faster and better, but also to think a lot more about when we work with governments, what are some of the questions that they care about, but also how to simplify the program. I think a lot of folks have mentioned how implementation is so key, and that's often at times, I would say, a determining factor into a success, of a program. If it's too complex, folks, tend to run away and don't want to do much. But thinking a lot about, what's a simpler version of the current offering that you're providing is helpful, I think, in the sense of, enabling implementation to actually happen, but also for government to be on side. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, so themes of champions, decision makers, keeping an eye out for the blockers, and also I think picking up on the this role that data can play, and like the comment that you made earlier, in the right form. Maybe it's not graphs, maybe it's tables, so finding it out, but it can speak and it can be very persuasive.
Yeah.
Great, well, thanks. And with that, we have some time for, that's not our timer for questions, that's our timer for this part. No, you're fine. That was our time for this part of it. We have time for the audience questions now. So we'll open it up and take some questions from the room. Do we have, yep, there's maybe 2 there and 1 here. Yeah.
Hi, Bumi. So earlier on, you started off by saying very often you guys have to externally fundraise for your programs. So I wondered, in these kind of government-led interventions that you've been involved in, what is the percentage split, like external funding versus internal government funding? And of the government funding, what are those line items? Is it like just the salaries of the teachers or the subject advisors, or is it actually like new inputs?
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a couple. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mary Abdo. I'm from the Center for Evidence and Implementation. Thanks so much to the panelists. I heard and observed as you were discussing that it sounds as though the context for evidence use in the institutions and in the geographies that you're working in is evolving all the time. If you could kind of wave a magic wand and think about what kinds of resources, institutions, or aspects might help to accelerate the development of that ecosystem? Like, where would you put your energy if you were accelerating that development?
Okay, and we'll do one more here, and then we'll give it to the.
Thanks so much, Emily Gray, FCDO. Adjia, you did a really impassioned and inspiring pitch for outcomes funding. It would also be incredibly interesting to know the risks and challenges that you face with it. And from others on the panel, if you feel moved to answer, is outcomes funding something that you would like to see in your context? If so, why? If not, why not?
Great. Okay, well, 3 great questions, and they're all kind of applied to all of you. So I might just go in the opposite order, give me a little bit of a break this time. Tepi, if that's okay, and start with you.
Yeah, so
yeah.
the first one, I'll take it. I need Hajia to come and meet our Minister of Botswana immediately, because I do think a lot of, thinking about outcomes funding is results based, and right, as you think about, what can push, government systems to move, right, and also to invest in organizations or programs that can actually bring results and impact, right? Outcomes-based funding can be one of the ways to do so. So, Ma'am Hajia, from Ghana, you come to Botswana, and then let's continue the conversation. And then also, just to your question, I'll just share that if I was to, one of the things that I've noticed as quite important is government stakeholders do have the interest and the appetite to want to understand a lot around evidence and data, but they don't necessarily have often, the tools as well as the training to do so. So I think, there's a lot of, organizations such as IPA, such as Youth Impact, that does a lot of work around really supporting governments to be able to understand and train, and to train them up on data collection, analysis, as well as monitoring. So I do think there's a piece that, a lot of players can play to be able to support, government to fully absorb. I think there's a lot of interest. I don't think they know how to get there. But again, I think it's a long-term bet, and it's possible. But I do think, there are other players that can really focus a lot on training up government on the take-up and use of evidence.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the government extra funds, I think from the Tanzania Institute of Education, I mentioned earlier that we do have some funds which are specifically located for research, and these are clearly indicated in our budget line. And the amount which is being allocated yearly depends on what we have been generated, because this is coming from our own sources of funds. So, we keep on increasing the amount year after year to make sure that all of our activities are really informed by evidences from research. And as you can see, the functions of the institutes are real key in terms of explaining the quality of education in Tanzania. So we keep on increasing the budget for conducting research to make sure that all of our activities are really informed by evidence from research. And regarding kind of resources needed, I think for now, we really need evidence from research. We really need systematically conducted research, which give us evidence on what to work to enable us improve our education system. So to me, if you ask me about what kind of resource would really prioritize, I think we need evidence from research which tell us on what to work in order to improve our performance. Thank you.
Thanks. Tackle a couple of those.
I was trying to avoid the tough question which FCDO themselves posed to me. The challenges, risk, and then I also want to add the success. You didn't ask me for the success. So let me start with the success.
Hold you to coming back though to challenges.
I'll come back to it. I'll come back. Or maybe let me do the challenges and then end on a good note. Okay, let me go the other way.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So GEOP, our concept is slightly different. And Claire mentioned that What Works Hub is only dealing with the in-school bit. So for GEOP, it's the out-of-school children who have never been to school or have dropped out of school 1 year or more between the ages of 8 and 16 qualify to be in the program. And these children have to be in the rural areas in the 27 lots for GEOP. No, 27 districts. It's 6 lots, 27 districts. Now, these children will have to be taught in their local language. They're taught numeracy and literacy in their local language by the service provider for 9 months. Upon completion of the 9 months, then they're transitioned into mainstream schools, where the service provider will be paid for retention in school for year 1 and year 2, before the service provider gets a full payment on one child. From the time they identify that child who has never been to school or dropped out, take that child through the 9 months accelerated learning program, transition them into school year 1 and year 2. So they get paid in phases. Now the challenge is, why is that child out of school? The child is out of school because that child is an extra farmhand, or the child, goes to the market. The child is an income earner for the family, or the family doesn't see the value of a child going to school. I went to a community and I asked the elderly, opinion leader in the community to encourage the children to go to school. Then he told me that I should see that child sitting there. He has finished university and he's unemployed. So what is the incentive for him to take children who are extra farm hands, let them leave the farm and then go to school? And I told them that these children, how much of an output are they providing on the farm? They're young. It's best if you send them to school and encourage them to study agriculture. They finish university with that knowledge. They can apply for grants, get a loan, come back home and do large-scale farming. You have the vast land, which you will get more money than immediately getting this small income that they're generating. He thought about it for a second. He said, I have a point. Then he would encourage the community to send their children to school. So these children go to the ALP. It's held in the afternoon. It starts between 2 and 5 before the sun sets, since most of the schools or the centers that they use do not have electricity, so the class has to end before the sun sets. And the child can go to the farm in the morning and continue whatever they are doing, earn income for the family. And upon 9 months, the child is transitioned into school. Now that's where the risk is. The child goes to school in the morning now. The child is not able to go to the farm. So the family is losing. Then they'll take that child out. Now this service provider needs that child to be in school to get paid. So that's where the risk is. And now there's the challenge. So the service provider will have to go and sensitize the community about the need to keep the children in school. And the family too are saying the child has to go and earn income. And then during market days, the child leaves school and go to the market to sell their products. The child is losing contact hours When the child loses contact hours, when they sit for the national standardized test, they would not do well, and the service provider would not get paid because they have not met their targets. So now the service providers find themselves constantly being in the school, monitoring the children who are absent and then following up at home to make sure that the children come back into school. And an additional issue that some parents raised to us was that when the children are home, when the children are home, they don't give them money for lunch. But now if they have to go to school, they have to give them money to eat in school. But when they were working on the farm, they never paid. So why should they? And all these are factors that may end up affecting the service provider, at the end of the project, getting their money. So now success, quickly. The Honorable Minister provided the children who have never been to school with school uniforms. We asked the service providers that school uniform is a critical component of the children feeling inclusive when they go to school. And they said that due to the project design and funding, they did not capture that in their budget, so they can't. So the Honorable Minister, to ensure that the children stay in school, made provision for the school uniforms for the children. And the service providers got certification from the National Teaching Council that each time they train a teacher, the teacher gets a CPD points, continuous professional development points, which made it easier for the teachers to be willing to go for the training because they know that would help them professionally. And some service providers provided furniture to the schools and in the form of dual desk and cupboards for the school. So those are the successes. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks.
So on the outcome funding, we tried a small experiment that didn't go anywhere. Yeah.
That's what we're here to discuss.
I think it was just contracting and things like how are we going to measure outcomes? Where's the system? Does it exist? Do we have administrative data that does this? Can you trust it? How do you strengthen it, etc.? And so that was never really, it never went anywhere. Another component is the demand for measuring outcomes, particularly in early grades. I think we could implement something like that if it was for school leaving, so the end of our schooling. Those results are very well known, and even if you don't call it an outcome-based fund, currently schools see changes in their enrollment depending on their pass rate and quality. So people understand that and are voting with their feet. And voting with their feet means the schools get more or less money because of how they perform at school leaving age. So if we were to implement it, that's the highest chance of success. Primary schooling has very weak measurement of outcomes. And so we would need to work a lot to develop an understanding of what you should learn in early grades, a system to actually measure it before we would get to outcome-based funding. So that would be a whole 10-year thing. And South Africa has very strong unions who have preempted this kind of thing and opposed it from inception, from like they hear you say it, it gets shut down, it won't get to later stages. And a further component of that is how the education budget is set up. 80% of it is salaries of teachers already. So you only have 20% for everything else you're doing in the system. Any outcome funding you are creating either means even more money is going to go to people's salaries, so no more anything else, consumables, books, etc., in classrooms, or you're taking teacher increases and using them for outcome funding, which again, union opposition. So I think our context isn't ripe for this. Then on the funding, funding ratios between government and external funding, I think government funds a lot of, it's quite a lot of capacity, but it's capacity. So it's our design, project management, oversight at the national office, the same at provincial office, same at district office. We did a time and cost study. It takes quite a lot of the time of officials to implement any of our studies. So it's not insignificant. The external money is for additional capacity, so direct training or coaching and new materials. But I think where we want to go to next is getting existing money currently allocated for learning materials to actually be used for program materials. It's still the same thing. So instead of buying the textbook, the other textbook, buy this program's textbook. I think that's where we're going.
Great, thanks. Well, we have 5 minutes left, so we can do maybe 2 more quick questions, but keep them quick, and we'll have to do quick answers also. But let's make use of our last 5 minutes. One here, and then we will go to Paul in the back. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Adia Umulisa. I'm from IP Rwanda. My question is for Hajia. When you first described the Education Outcomes Fund program, it kind of seemed complicated. And when we tried to link it to the policy initiatives, I wanted to ask, so in terms of student retention especially, and given that these are service providers who are working and you've described the complicated ways that they're working to kind of retain students, what's the sustainability plan? Because after the project has ended, how will what kind of government resources will be deployed to also kind of go through this complexity of keeping the children in school, especially after what you described with the elderly's reluctance and the household bit about it. What kind of existing government resources will you leverage to make sure the students are retained? Thank you.
Thanks. And Paul, quick question.
I'm Paul Glovey. I think this is a very simple question. I'm wondering the extent to which the people in the forum there think that the research for other African countries or for other countries that are not from Africa is relevant for your policy decisions, or do you think you need to try it out in your countries, even if it looks good in other countries, because your situation may be different? I'm asking this because talking to people in Morocco, and some people on our team think we need to tell them they need to try everything in Morocco. Doesn't matter what happened in other countries. Yeah.
Great question on relevance of evidence. So with that, Hajia, I'll go to you first to do that one, and then everyone will get like 30 seconds to touch on relevance of evidence from elsewhere. Hajia, you first.
Sustainability, that's a great question, and everybody's asking about that. What we are doing in GEOP is actually mandated by complementary education agency in Ghana and Ghana Education Service. Both are agencies under the Ministry of Education. Now, GES, which is handling the mainstream schools, they are mandated to ensure that no child is left behind. So if a child stops coming to school, they're supposed to go and follow up. And sometimes they do, and sometimes when they go, they tell the child is going to the farm, there's nothing the teacher or the head teacher can do, and they come back. Now, through this project, at the end of it, the impact evaluation, we see what worked, what didn't work, then we will scale it up. It doesn't necessarily have to do with funding. It's the methodology. What did they do to encourage the parents to let their children come back to school? What did they do? How did they do it? We learn it and then we scale it up. So it's not all about money at all. And in GEOP, the service providers and my team, whenever we go out in the field, we follow up. Why did you take the child out of school? Please bring the child back. Once you spend that one-on-one with them, they listen to you, it makes sense, they come back. So it's not necessarily about money, but we can make it work. We just need to know the right formula and scale it up.
Thanks. Okay, Tepi, 20 seconds, relevance.
Absolutely. I think one of the great things about being part of the What Works Hub and also working with folks that care a lot about implementation science is for us to be able, to ensure measurement across various countries and also think about how we can use these learnings in our various contexts. So, very much pro learning from a lot of research across various countries and then contextualizing it in your own countries to adapt your program.
Nah?
Yeah, thank you. I think in Tanzania, I can say that right now we are really working to make sure that we make informed decision making, decisions which are really based on the evidence from research. So we are really ready to work with what we have to make sure that we also learn from other countries and we find what is really working in our context. And if you allow me, please let me mention that in Tanzania right now, for the past 20 years, the president has been appointed ministers who have been used to work as academicians. And because of this, I mean, we are really serious to make sure that each and every decision is really based on the basis of finance. So we are really happy to have what we have, and we are ready to implement decisions which really tell us what really work. Thank you.
Thanks. And with permission from Claire, we'll let Mpumi also have her
Sure.
30 seconds.
It depends on who you ask. If you ask the researchers, similar context, and we use international assessment data for that. So we're one of the few developing countries in PEARLS. We track countries that are similar to us, look at their trajectories and want to learn from them. If you ask other people, they want the best in the world. So Singapore, Finland, etc. So it depends. But from a research perspective, similar context, happy to learn from them and then adapt for implementation. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you to our wonderful panel.